Hi David, I just wanted to give you a bit of a walkthrough on the Texa software. We'll look at trucks, heavy duty and light, i.e. van or 4x4 pickups. Um, this is the main screen. You can see we're in all 5 different environments, but the one we're interested in is the truck. So we'll click into there. Now, what we're faced with initially is the category. So Texa have broken it down into truck, bus and coach, trailer, semi-trailer, light trucks, powertrain, which we'll come back to. That's where we can look at generator, engines, and also down into small utility truck. So what we'll do, we'll click into truck, and then I think we'll look at Freightliner. So we've got an alphabetical list on the right hand side, but we can also obviously scroll down. You can see the coverage is huge. I mean, everything. You can see a lot of British, UK models, to Chinese, to pretty much everything's covered. So into Freightliner, so I'll head down. Now the little D means I've got a demo mode, so I can pretend to be communicating with the vehicle, so at least you can see how the system reacts. So if we click into Freightliner, with these it gives me a choice of 3 engines. We'll go with Cummins because I think that's obviously quite a popular one. So we'll click through there. Now what this will then do will take you to the self-diagnosis screen. Now this rectangle that's flashing at us, that's the global system scan. So basically doing a full scan of the entire vehicle and all the systems that are on it. What we've got next to it is actions on the vehicle. So it's broken down into vehicle maintenance, adjustments and coding, and activation or tests that you guys can carry out. If we just scroll down here, you can see all the systems that, as long as they're fitted by the manufacturer, we can talk to them. Again, you can see some of them have got D's, so I can pretend to be communicating. So I've got quite a few there covered. We'll come to the left hand side shortly, but what we'll do initially, let's go into the engine. Again, there's a few options just depending on protocol and ECU type, so we'll go with the J1939. So we click onto start. Now click into demo diagnosis and confirm. So this will now start populating a test program for us to look at. Follow the on-screen instructions. Okay, so it's taken us into, well, what will always take you into is the fault screen initially. So you can see it's generated a lot of active faults. So the system works on a traffic light system, so active is red. If it's a memory fault, it'll be amber. And obviously once you've managed to clear or make your fix and then clear, the codes will go into a stored green status. So just looking down some of these, obviously you've got a reasonable description on what the issue is. And on the right hand side you can see faded out are little icons. So you've got a web icon, you've got a wiring diagram icon, and also a question mark. Now we can double click these and it'll give us a bit more information, a PE code and or PID and MID, that type of thing, and a few other bits and pieces of information. The other thing we can do, as you can see, I've highlighted that one. In the bottom right hand corner, these icons will light up as well. So the question mark just gives you additional help, what they're calling guided diagnostics, so you know basically what to check next. It's not in every fault that comes up, but there is additional information in the technical data as well. So if we click on the eye there, on the question mark there, you can see it comes up basically with a very short explanation. The engine protection device for oil pressure is off. So okay. Obviously depending on the complexity of the fault and the sensor, and obviously there'll be additional information in there. On that same one, there's a troubleshooting forum here, what they're calling Solve Problems. And that's an internet-based forum where Texa will put fixes or previous issues that other customers have had. So you can log into there and just see if there's any additional guidance. The one next to it, the 123 with the snowflake, that hasn't actually appeared or lit up. Basically that's what they call freeze frame data. So that will be information that's stored in the ECU at the time that the fault occurred. It tends to be on Euro 5, definitely Euro 6. So we'll have a look at another demo mode later, and potentially we can see some information for that. The other thing is obviously the component wiring diagram, so that's lit up, so it means there is a component in the wiring diagram that's associated with that active fault. So what we can do, we can click into there, and that will basically take us directly to the TEXA wiring diagram. So you can see as I move the mouse across the screen, you can see it's interactive. It's actually obviously pointed out the oil pressure sensor there, it's highlighted it, so you can at least start looking at where it pins out or pins onto the ECU and what other units or sensors are associated with it. So as you can see, as I scroll across, and there's some there which will have a location as well. So for example, the high pressure fuel sensors on the high pressure fuel distribution duct. So that's all quite useful. So we can click on that item, and there's a data card here. Sometimes you'll have pictures, sometimes data cards, sometimes check sheets. So we can click on that data card, and this, for example, comes up with a generic check sheet. So what that will then give you is the guidance. One, it'll tell you more about the part itself, how it works. I'll scroll down slowly. So we've got the component operating principle, some diagrams in there, and then we've got recommended checks. So you can see they're giving you a bit of guidance what to check, and obviously worst case scenario ECU replacement. Again, you've got signal and power supply check down here, and it goes on further down. Okay, so there's a lot of information in there to help guide the mechanic as to what to do next. As you can see here in the middle, the big pink item, that's the engine ECU. So actually we can click on that and click on connector, and that will then give us the pin configuration. Again, massively helpful if you're trying to find out where something's pinned back to. So that's there. We've got wiring colours and other sorts of bits and pieces on here, but as you can see, they're very useful and very in-depth details on there. Okay, we can print these and obviously save them to PDF as well. So we'll just come back out of there. This takes us back to the fault screen. Now, as with any diagnostic tool, we can print this information, we can save this information, we can also obviously try and erase the faults. Now, obviously, if it's an active fault, there's some work that's required before we can try and erase it, but we can always try. What you've got here is technical documentation, so we can click on that, and that will then give us the system vehicle sheets that are associated with that ECU for that particular model. And again, the wiring diagrams there, so you can see there's quite a few depending on the Cummins specification. Okay, vehicle sheets, this is more generic information, so construction of trailer sockets and so on. System sheets, these are specifically for whichever Cummins system that we're on, so we can click into one of those and we've got some example information there. So accelerator pedal calibration, manual engine service reset, notes regarding AdBlue. There's a lot of information on AdBlue in the TEXA. There's just a few bits and pieces here giving you a bit of background on how to look after the AdBlue and so on. Again, the manual engine service reset, that will again give you a manual reset procedure to follow. Okay, so it varies on the application as to how much technical information we've got, but Freightliner, we are generally pretty good, you know, also with the Cummins engine as well. So also, okay, so we've got that. A few of the other tabs I wanted to explain at the top. So we've got status. Sometimes switches are put separately in a separate tab. Other times they're actually within the faults or the sensors in the live data. So there's just a few here that they've put, so you can at least see if the systems are working. ECU info, that's obviously pulling out what it can from the vehicle, and obviously it'll populate whatever it can populate. So again, that's information you can print off to use later. The last two on here, activations. So you can see you've just got a couple of tests here you can do, so error cleaning and reading the speed limiter. Settings wise, there's obviously a lot more programming basically that you can carry out. So you can see as I scroll down, there's quite a lot of settings that we can control. Again, you can see we can change the speed, maximum there, got some PTO options. Again, down to transmission, we can do some bits and pieces on there. As you can see, so there's quite a lot of things that we can do there, and if we click into one of them and click on the help, that again will tell us what we're going to try and do, and sometimes depending on what the procedure is, it will then give you the procedure that the system is going to carry out. So most importantly, live data. So these are all the sensors on that particular ECU. So we've got here, we're saying 13 parameters or live data that we can look at. So you see we've got a description of the sensor, on the right hand side we've got a unit of measure and the reading itself. So again, fuel delivery, engine load, turbocharger pressure, all the sort of obvious ones you'd expect. As long as they're programmed to the ECU and they're electronically read, we can look at them. So for example, you know, a lot of these are static, and again, because we're in a test program, there's not a great deal we can do, but we can double click those to create a line diagram. Very useful if you're doing things like wheel speed sensors. You can watch a peak and a trough in a line diagram. What we can also do is, if you, on some vehicles, you'll know yourself, obviously you've got some that have maybe, you know, maybe a few hundred sensors. So there's the opportunity to filter that list. So what it'll do, it'll put it in a alphabetical list. You can then just pick only the sensors you want to look at and create your own list. From that, you are then able to do up to a 30-minute record. So you can take the vehicle out and you can run it for 30 minutes and record those sensors, and once you go back to the workshop, you can start investigating it further. That's just one option there. Again, we can save all this information, we can print all this information. There's a customer management system internally where we can save the history of the vehicle. Every time you plug in, you can then build on that history, so each time you can see if faults are coming back. We'll just untick that and get the rest of the sensors back. What we've also got here is dashboard mode. So what this will do is it will put a lot of those live readings into a format that we would all understand. It's the same live data, it's just, like I said, it's much easier to see and read and understand. So that's quite a useful feature. Okay, so that's the sort of basics of how the Texa will read the information. There's a lot more other bits and pieces we can do with that information, but that's essentially what we'd be looking at. So I'll just cancel communication there. Okay, so what we've also got, obviously when we were on the vehicle, or when we were communicating, we had the opportunities for adjustments and coding and activations. Now obviously that was specifically for the engine. Now if we wanted to just have a bit of an overview of what we can do, we can click into the vehicle maintenance, and you can see here a list of the sorts of basic service resets that we can do. Obviously the SCR system, we can do a static DPF regen, very useful. Braking, again, reset ABS controller. Also, again, in exactly the same way, the adjustments and coding, we can look across every system and see what we can do. So again, SCR, you can see there's a lot of resets we can do there. Transmission, again, we can calibrate that, and the clutch also, obviously. So you can see there's a lot in there that we can potentially do. Okay. Just on the left hand side, like I said, there's a few options here I don't need to explain at this stage, but again, we've got access to all the technical data for that vehicle. So you can see, for example, on the transmission, we've got information if it's an Allison. We can then look at the manual reset procedure there. The air conditioner, again, system check, ABS, again, depending on which WABCO system it is, there'll be information in there about the system. So again, all very useful technical backup that you guys would need. Okay, now what we'll just go to now, we'll drop into the Isuzu. I've picked an N series I think we'll look at briefly. Again, we've got a demonstration mode on here, and I'll just pick a random engine that we've got a demonstration mode on. You can see I'm just clicking through there quite quickly. Now what I wanted to show you just on this, obviously you can see again it's exactly the same format. We've got the inclusion of ADAS, which is the Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, so that's calibration of radars, parking sensors, that type of thing. You do need additional hardware to be able to do that, and you might not be at that stage, but the Tex has got the ability to do that. What I wanted to show you is on the left hand side we've got technical data and checks. Now basically this is auto data, so we have an auto data for car and for truck, so all the information you would need for mechanically, so torque settings, lubricants, types of lubricants, levels, and so on. So we can look at the tightening torques here, and you see we've got the information there, bolt layout, and so on. So there's a lot of information in there, which is quite useful and saves you having to go to the dealer. We've also got checks and scheduled maintenance, so actually you're going to be able to electronically service your vehicles and keep record. So for example, a main service, so if we do click on the every 64,000 or 12 months, you can see we can actually electronically fill this out. You can save it, print it, and keep record within the system. So again, very useful part of the software. Okay, and again, down to service illustrations, which I'm sure if you've seen Autodata, you will have seen these sorts of pictures before. Again, just very helpful when you're servicing your vehicles. Okay, what we'll do, we'll just touch on the light truck as well. So we're into light truck here. So again, A to Z list. We include US, Chinese, South American. Everything is covered. You can see here for Mercedes, for example, we've got Latin America and Asia Pacific options, Nissan, and so on. So we're going down to Toyota. Again, we've got a vehicle list there, or model list. We'll pick a Hilux. I'm sure there's a Hilux in your fleet. So again, there's a lot more systems on these, changing lanes, cruise control, keyless go. There's a lot of systems in here, and the start stop, obviously. So there's a lot more ECUs on these, certainly. So useful to see. So we'll pick one. Let's go for the instrument panel. It's going to be a very basic demonstration, because obviously there's not going to be a huge amount of sensors on the instrument panel. Okay, so you can see here there's been a couple of faults in the past, and they've actually they've been corrected and put into a stored status. But again, we can go into the live data and we can look at the sensors and the statuses that are associated with that instrument panel. Okay, so exactly the same format across the board. Activation wise, obviously you can turn things on and off, basically everything there. Brake warning light, for example, and it will just give you a brief description as to what you're actually going to do. So we'll just disconnect from there. Lastly, what I'd like to do is, obviously I appreciate this is Moreland's side of things, but if we go into powertrain, we've then breaks it down to brake and suspension, comfort systems, engine and transmission. So if you have a standalone unit, you can obviously connect into that. So transmission, similarly, all the usual suspects there. But we'll go into the engine and you can see again the different engines that we can connect with. I know Moreland mentioned MTU, so again you can see we can communicate with these in exactly the same way, and again we've got all the usual bits and pieces that we can do for these. Okay. Lastly, obviously, I'd like to just quickly show you is the customer management system. So without confusing you too much by going through these screens too quickly, it's just to take you to the customer management there. So what we can see are all the vehicles that previously I've connected to and saved information on. So you can see there's a lot in there of varying degrees, and obviously mainly trucks in here. So there's quite a few there. But what we can do, if we just sort that by the latest one, I'll go into a Mercedes Actros. I only mentioned Mercedes, but that was on the light vehicle side. But this is where you would save the information for that. For your whole fleet, you can save it in here, and every time that you communicate, there's a date, there's a time, and there's the details that you wanted to look at. So you see here we did a global scan. It will just ask me to put a VIN number in. I'll just put something spurious in for the moment. And this is the format that you would see. So you can see we did a scan, and what it's done, it's listed below all of the faults that came up, whether they were active, memory, and so on. So you can see on this particular vehicle there was a lot of errors. Okay, so again that's stored in the system and accessible, and again you can print this, save it into a PDF, email yourself, and so on. So very useful system, and like I said, if you've got a few guys in your workshop, they can obviously see what the previous person has done for that vehicle. Okay, so that's just a general overview, and obviously we'll talk more.